Okay, what we want to do in this video now is finish off the third reason that is given for why the demand curve slopes downwards. And again, I know the videos may be long at times, and that's only trying to increase your understanding, because I'm firmly of the absolute certainty that if you can understand economics, then it's just so much easier for you to progress. It's all about comprehension, understanding, and from that then you can analyze future issues that we come up against in economics. So why does the demand curve slope downwards? Really? Okay, so what we're saying is we've already talked about the income effect and the substitution effect, and now what we're talking about is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, forgive me, I am old, so some of you will probably not get this reference, and it's from Oliver Twist, which is Charles Dickens' play, and it's very famous in an orphanage, and he goes up and says, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" So what we're saying here is that the law of diminishing marginal utility states that as extra units of a good are consumed, eventually the satisfaction gained from each successive unit will fall. Well, we could go from a stage where we're absolutely starving, like poor Oliver is, and then if he has one bowl of gruel, unfortunately, he's eating, and then that, because he's so hungry, that will actually satiate him. It'll give him some marginal utility, some extra happiness from that first bowl. But if he keeps on eating and eating every single successive bowl of porridge or gruel that he's eating, he will become less and less extra happy. Each extra bowl of porridge will give him less extra happiness, which is marginal utility. So then he's stuffed, and so then he doesn't want any more. If he keeps on eating, something like that's going to happen. Again, I love these rude photos. Okay, so when looking at this here, when does the law of diminishing marginal utility set in? So what we're saying is after the consumption of each successive good, and with no time lapses, what happens to your extra happiness in terms of utils? Well, in terms of utils, after I have the first Big Mac, let's say, right, I have 25 utils from that first one. Now, after the second Big Mac, I have a total of 55 utils from consuming the first and the second. After the third Big Mac, I have a total of 75 utils from consuming the first, second, and third. That's not the marginal. So how do we calculate the marginal? Well, basically what we have to do is this second figure here, to calculate the marginal utility of the second Big Mac, I take the total away from this total utility after consuming both the first, because that's how much I get for the first good. That's the amount of utils or happiness I get from consuming the first good. And then this is the amount that I get from consuming the two. So if I take this from this, I get the marginal utility of the second. Now, it just so happens in this case that I was just so hungry, the second one even made me happier than the first. But after the second, yes, I got a positive increase in happiness, as shown by my total happiness here. But it had diminished from the previous one. So the marginal utility of the third Big Mac was less than the second. And we can see that the marginal utility is going down, down, down. So when does the law of diminishing marginal utility sets in? It sets in after the second unit or on the third unit. Okay, that's when it sets in. So all marginal utility is saying that is the extra happiness you get from consuming one extra unit of a good, and the law of diminishing marginal utility says this happens here. Eventually a point will be reached when the extra happiness you get, the third unit only gave me 20 utils of happiness when the second unit gave me 30, will diminish, will decline, will fall. That's what it's saying. Okay, now surprise, surprise, we're back to the Big Mac consumption here. Right, now this is the total utility, and what I want you to see here is that total utility is rising up to a point, then it's actually falling. And if we look at this, we see that the law of diminishing marginal utility sets in straight away after the first or on the second, and that is most likely true depending on the serving size. When we get to a marginal utility of 0, you would be indifferent between consuming that good if it was given to you for free. In no way would you be willing to pay for it, but you would be indifferent between consuming that good if you didn't have to pay any money. Whereas a marginal utility of -3 means that you would actually have to be paid to consume that good, because you would have to be compensated for the lack or the loss of utility that you suffered here. But again, I'm just stressing this for those of you that haven't watched these videos in quite some time. Marginal utility is falling, and that's the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, it's important that I mention this and this, because this, what are we trying to explain? We're trying to explain why the demand curve slopes downwards. Right, so in order to do that, we've got to explain a few things. A rational consumer will spend his or her income in such a way that the ratio of marginal utility to price is the same for all goods consumed. In this way, they maximize total utility. This is also explaining that bit about the substitution effect, because we're talking about this. MU1 over P1 equals MU2 over P2 equals MUN over PN. A consumer will spend their money in such a way where the marginal utility divided by the price is the same for all goods consumed. So that means is if I'm getting 100 marginal utils from the last unit of this good that I consumed and the price is a tenner, this ratio is 10. So therefore, I'm getting 10 marginal utils per euro spent. That's the deal. That's the value of money that I'm getting from it. So therefore, if this was €5, I would be in equilibrium if this marginal utility was 50, because I would still be getting 10 utils for the per euro spent for the last unit of this good that I consumed, and so on. Okay, and a consumer said to be in equilibrium, which means maximizing their utility. And guys, let's not forget what the first real world issue is. How do consumers and producers maximize their economic objectives from engaging in economic actions? Well, this is how consumers do it. And this leads to a downward sloping demand curve. Because if you want me to consume more of a good and at the same time keep this equation which maximizes my utility, if you know that if I can consume more, this will fall. So therefore, you're going to have to drop this in order for me to consume more. And hence, if you want quantity demanded to rise, you have to drop the price. All right. Now, I hope this makes sense. Excuse me. Until all their income is spent. Don't forget that. And they will spend their money in this way. Okay, so let's have a look at this, right? I've gone into much more detail in the previous other videos on Unit 1.2, but let's just have a look at this, right? So a Mongolian tourist comes to Ireland for a weekend with €40 to spend. There are two goods that he can buy, good A and good B. Using the data below, what combinations of good A will he choose? So I want you to understand this, that the price of good A is €5, but the price of good B is €10. And I would take a photograph of this and pause the video. Now, this is directly taken from a previous question, all right? So I just want you to know you have seen this before if you've watched my previous videos. But having a look at this, what would they do? So don't forget, this is twice as much. This costs, part B or product B costs twice as much as product A. So therefore, in equilibrium, the marginal utility of B should be twice as much as the marginal utility of A. Right, well, what are they going to do? So MUA over PA, right? So there's all, this figure here is represented by these numbers here, and this figure here is represented by these numbers here. So where is he getting the best value for money? He's got €40 to spend, and good B is a tenner, and good A is 5. So therefore, which is giving him the most marginal utility per good per euro spent? Well, it's the first item, the first unit of good A. Now that he's consumed that, his marginal utility for the next one will have dropped. That's why we've gone from 50 to 45, because the law of diminishing marginal utility. But is 9 greater than 8? Well, yes, it is. That means he's getting 9 utils per euro spent on the second unit of good A, and which is higher than the 8 utils per euro spent on the first unit of good B. Now we go down, so he's consumed 2 units of good A and he spent €10 and he has 40 to spend. Right, so now he's indifferent between the third unit of good A and the first unit of good B. So basically he's just going to consume both of those. So that's 5, 10, 15, 25. All right, now he's 7 and 7. Okay. Is that right? 5, 10, 15, 25, yeah. So basically he's going to be indifferent between the second unit of good B and the, what's this, the fourth unit of good A. So that's 20 and that's 20 there. So he's spent all his money, right? So the idea here is that because he is spending his money in this way, which is in order to maximize utility, and if you don't understand this, go back to the series of videos on 1.2. That means that he has made the most of his money, he's got the most utility out of his money. Now, I know this is longer, but this is the exact same question, but I have dropped the price of good B. Now don't forget in the previous answer, he consumed 2 units of good B, 4 units of good A. But now I've dropped the price of good B. So following a fall in price, how does this fit into the idea that the demand curve is downward sloping? So again, he's going to spend his money in this way. And what I've done is I've taken all of the marginal utilities and divided by their prices, realizing now we're dividing each of these by a lower price. Well, let's look at this. Which is higher, the 10 utils per euro spent on good A or the 16 utils per euro spent on good B? Well, it's the 16. So the first thing already he's doing is buying a good of 1 unit of good B. Now that he's bought 1 unit of good B, he's down to 70 as a terms of marginal utility. Well, the 14 utils that he gets in terms of marginal utility per euro spent on good B is still higher than the 10 and is the 12. So already he's bought 3 goods. So already following a reduction in price of good B, he has bought more of good B. As price fell, quantity demanded rose. Okay, now he's indifferent between the two here, so he's going to buy the 4th unit of good B, which is, so he's bought 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 1st unit of good A, and now he's going to go to good A, and now he's going to be indifferent between good B and good A. So how much is this? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Now he has spent all of his money. But what happened to the quantity demanded, because of the law of diminishing marginal utility, had to settle into the equimarginal principle. As the price of good B fell, it went from 2 units to 5. Therefore, as the price of good B fell, quantity demanded rose. Now, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to bore you senseless, but that would also be, I could have put B up to 20, okay, and therefore show that the price would fall. So let's look at this now. Again, we're on our downward sloping demand curve, and we're trying to explain how a change in price causes quantity demanded to change, and therefore how from the income effect, the substitution effect, and the law of diminishing marginal utility, we can derive the law of demand. Okay, do not get scared from this, guys. I know it may be confusing at the start, but I promise you it gets easier. Right, so what we've got now is we've dropped our price from P1 to P2, and we're saying that quantity has increased, and that is true, okay? The price of the good has fallen. Therefore, this consumer is getting more marginal utility per euro spent on this good than they were before. We're assuming a ceteris paribus relationship, which means that the price and marginal utility of all the other goods have stayed the same. Therefore, I buy more of this good and less of others because I am getting a higher marginal utility to price ratio. That's why, and that's kind of the same as the substitution effect, but we're talking about the law of diminishing marginal utility. As we buy more and more of this good, the marginal utility falls because of the law of diminishing marginal utility. So if you want to incentivize me to buy more of it, and in keeping with the equimarginal principle, which is mu1 over p1 equals mu2 over p2, you must lower the price to keep those two ratios the same. All right, and then on the other hand, if we do a price increase, now right now again there's been no change in consumption, no law of diminishing marginal utility. As the price rises, I buy less of the good, and the reason is why. Well, the first thing is the price of the good has risen, so the denominator has risen. I am now getting less marginal utility per euro spent on this good than I was before. So you're going to cut back. You're going to buy less of it. Therefore, I buy less of this good and I buy more of other goods. Okay? And that is essentially the entirety of the whole thing. Guys, I understand it may be difficult. I promise you got this. Thank you so much for watching, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next video.